One of the great things about WWE's brand of sports entertainment is the sheer variety of wrestlers that are typically at their disposal. Having characters of all different shapes, sizes, and styles to pick from makes for some very intriguing matches. And it has also made for some mammoth mismatches. As one chinless wonder once put it, any man with two hands has a fighting chance. Well, that may be true to an extent, but the chance does decrease somewhat when you're put in the ring with somebody the size of a bloody cement truck. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 biggest mismatches in WWE history. Join us. Number 10, Nathan Jones vs. Shannon Moore. Nathan Jones wasn't in WWE for very long, but he sure made an impression in the brief time he was on the roster. It wasn't always a good one, but there we go. The Colossus of Boggo Road only wrestled a handful of televised matches, a couple of which were against far smaller opponents like Nunzio and Shannon Moore. Matched up against the high-flying cruiserweights, Jones was able to demonstrate his size and power by throwing them around at will, especially in his match with Moore. The little MFer was more than happy to fling himself about for a bloke that was practically double his size, taking some gnarly bumps to the floor and a risky moonsault one with an Australian assist. Moore's match with Jones came during a storyline where SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman was trying to help him step out of the departing Matt Hardy's shadow and then rewarding him for his courage with more matches against his gruesome goon squad, pitting him against Matt Morgan, Jones, Big Show, A-Train, and Brock Lesnar in consecutive weeks. So just keep that in mind next time you're mad at your boss. Number 9, Big Daddy V vs. Colin Delaney. Like Shannon Moore, poor pencil-thin Colin Delaney was put through the ringer on a weekly basis by being thrown to the wolves during his unlikely spell on ECW in 2008. What was supposed to be a one-shot deal turned into a recurring gag as Delaney got put in there with Mark Henry, Kane, the Great Khali, JBL, Big Show, Mike Knox, Vladimir Kozlov, and pretty much anyone else who could cause him some serious physical harm. Every one of those bouts was a giant mismatch, but Delaney's run of terror began with the biggest one of all. On the January 1st, 2008 episode of ECW on Sci-Fi, the luckless jobber squared off with the gargantuan Big Daddy V. Happy New Year, Colin! Outweighed by someone almost 3 times his size, there wasn't much Delaney could do except for survive as long as possible before being squashed or potentially swallowed whole like an anaconda's dinner. It went as expected, with the former King of the Ring winner manhandling his victim and putting him away within 90 seconds before swallowing him whole like a near 500-pound anaconda. Number 8, Big Show vs. Rey Mysterio. Fans of legendary luchador Rey Mysterio wondered how he would fare in the land of the giants when he joined WWE in the summer of 2002. Initially plugged into the cruiserweight division, it wasn't too long before the masked man began battling Vince McMahon's monsters. The sternest test for Mysterio in the earlier days of his WWE career was the Big Show. Rey had managed to just about avoid Show during their WCW days, but came up against him in a mismatch at Backlash 2003. The biggest little man against the world's largest athlete was certainly an attraction, but there was no doubt as to who the winner would be at the time, with Show crushing him in mere minutes. Adding insult to injury, Mysterio was then strapped to a stretcher and swung like a human baseball bat into the ring post. The two men would clash on numerous other occasions, with the 500-pounder usually coming out on top. Thankfully, the two were able to sort out their differences and form a tag team years later. In fact, they grew so close that sometimes Show would even let Rey sit on his knee and work the steering wheel while they drove to the next town. Number 7, Braun Strowman vs. Kalisto. The 2010s version of Big Show vs. Rey Mysterio was Braun Strowman against Kalisto. The 2010s were rubbish, weren't they? The monster among men and the man who was good at doing, good lucha things got into it in the spring of 2017. Strowman had previously eliminated Kalisto from the Royal Rumble, and a week after the masked man was drafted from SmackDown to Raw, Braun targeted him once more, shoving him in a dumpster like a big bad bully with poor social media instincts and setting up, what else, a dumpster match for the following week. After being battered about for most of the contest, Kalisto somehow managed to avoid being put in the bin and dropkicked the big man's knees, resulting in an improbable upset victory. Having watched the luchador convincingly get his masked backside handed to him and figuring anything other than a Strowman win was a fanciful, the crowd came unglued at the finish. Unfortunately for Kalisto, Braun didn't take losing the match very well, capping off a post-match beatdown by locking his opponent in the dumpster and pushing it off the side of the stage. Number 6, the Oddities vs Kaientai. Having a numerical advantage should really make a mismatch in favor of that team, but that wasn't the case at SummerSlam 1998. Kaientai probably thought the odds had been evened up when they met the Oddities in a 4-on-3 handicap match, but even with the extra man, it was clear that Taka Michinoku, Funaki, Men's Teo, and Dick Togo had their work cut out for them when coming up against Kurgan, Golga, and Giant Silver. The high-flying Japanese quartet weren't lacking in skill, but were well outmatched when it came to size. Flanked by Luna Vachon and the Insane Clown Posse, the Oddities had fun toying with their much smaller foes, including in 4-on-1 scenarios. To be fair, while the bulk of the contest was played for laughs, Kaientai did manage to look competitive in brief spells. The result was never in doubt, however, and a quadruple chokeslam followed by the biggest of splashes, well, Golga basically fell on top of them, confirmed the inevitable. This one easily gets in my top 5 favorite Oddities matches of all time. Check it out! Number 5, Brock Lesnar vs Ricochet. Brock Lesnar has to be the overwhelming favourite in any match he's booked in, whether it's against a super heavyweight, a reigning champion, or in something like the 30-man Royal Rumble. The Beast Incarnate's credentials speak for themselves, and Brock has conquered amateur wrestling, pro wrestling, and MMA, doing so as a massive, lightning-quick, absolutely terrifying physical specimen. Some of Lesnar's most compelling WWE matches have been against far smaller opponents, the likes of AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, and Eddie Guerrero. A classic David vs Goliath bout was what fans had hoped to get out of Ricochet's challenge of the WWE title at Super Showdown 2020, but the King of Flight was in way over his head and things ended up being about as one-sided as you can get. Brock made Ricochet pay for his part in helping Drew McIntyre eliminate him from the Rumble, ragdolling him around the ring with suplexes before finishing him with an F5 in 1 minute and 28 seconds. Well, he doesn't get paid by the hour, I guess. As for you, Ricochet, you tried your best, and you failed miserably.
The lesson is, never try.
Number 4, the Great Khali vs Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio may have been considered a cruiserweight for the first few years of his WWE career, but he was booked to win the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania 22. It was a barrier-breaking moment, not just for Rey, but for others like him too. And as World Heavyweight Champion, the Master of the 619 would have to defend his title against some of the beefiest beef boys on the roster. Matches against JBL, Mark Henry, and Kane were taxing, but Mysterio's biggest hill to climb was with newcomer the Great Khali. One of the biggest men in WWE history, the Punjabi giant showed the world what he was all about when he dismantled The Undertaker and pinned the Phenom with 1 foot on his chest in his pay-per-view debut. Before tangling with the dead man, Khali had a non-title date with Ray on an episode of SmackDown emanating from Mysterio's hometown of San Diego. Yeah, sure, invite his friends and family to witness the bloodbath, why not? And Bloodbath is what it would have turned into had Khali not decided to finish Mysterio off within a few painful minutes. He made up for this show of mercy later by trying to burst Rey's head open like a little grape. Number 3, Big Show vs Floyd Mayweather. By definition, any celebrity or sports star crossing over to WWE is at a disadvantage. That's not to say they can't put in a good showing and even cause upsets in matches that sometimes struggle to maintain suspension of disbelief. It probably helps when you have legitimate combat sports experience or are, widely regarded as one of the greatest boxers of all time. And the diminutive Floyd Mayweather would have been matched up pretty well, at least from a size perspective, with, say, someone like Chavo Guerrero. But Big Money Mayweather is Big Money box office, and Chavo Guerrero just doesn't really shift tickets. Sorry, Chavito. It made more monetary sense to present a freak show boxer versus wrestler bout with Floyd taking on Big Show in a no DQ match at WrestleMania 24. The undefeated lightweight brought his entire entourage to the showcase of the Immortals for his showdown with the world's largest athlete, but the former WWE champion took care of them all. Didn't sport the brass knuckles this time though, did he? Number 2, Brock Lesnar vs Zach Gowen. Have you heard the one about the one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest? Alright, good. Now let me tell you about the one-legged wrestler and his match with this absolute freak of nature. Around this time, the next big thing was starting to show people who the real Brock Lesnar was, and Vince McMahon booked him in a match with Zach Gowen on the August 21st, 2003 episode of SmackDown as a warm-up for SummerSlam opponent Kurt Angle, of course. Poor Zach was like a lamb to the slaughter in front of a hometown crowd with his mother sitting at ringside as he clashed with the unhinged beast. Lesnar had shown the week before just how vicious he could be with someone a fraction of his size when he turned Brian Spanky Kendrick into a stain on the mat, but even that almighty beating paled in comparison to the job he did on Gowen. Brock left Zack in a bloodied and beaten pile on the floor, having destroyed him with powerbombs, chair shots, and F5s into the ring post. Gowen technically won the match by disqualification, mind, so small mercies, eh? Number 1, the Great Khali versus Hornswoggle. Fathers sometimes have to discipline their children. I don't have any kids of my own, that I know of anyway, but it's a life lesson I have learned well during my lifetime of WWE fandom. Vince McMahon often took matters into his own hands in order to set Shane and Stephanie straight, and goodness me, wasn't that uncomfortable. But the genetic jackhammer gave the honors to the Great Khali, at least initially, when it came to humbling his illegitimate son, Hornswoggle. Upset that the little bastard turned out to be one of his own, McMahon booked the smallest performer in WWE against the biggest at Survivor Series 2007. Hornswoggle showed no fear as he squared up to the Punjabi giant's belly button before smartly retrieving a shillelagh from under the ring. Khali duly took the stick from him and twatted him over the head with that pavement slab he calls a right hand. Now, if you think there's something funny about a very large man smacking someone dressed like a leprechaun, you are sadly mistaken. Because actually, there's something very funny about the visual, though the laughs came to an end when that spoilsport Finlay ran in for the DQ.